be committed to in the future. If we expand the DC Beltway by one more lane all the way around, are we better served by spending that money on making the purple line on the DC Metro instead, and accommodating that more travel through our metro system, so they can weigh these things and make conscious decisions, knowing what the future impact is going to be, not just financial. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you clarify, I think, just in your presentation overall, a comment I had, was when you talked about your methodology, you showed the light rail, you said you had some alternatives, but didn't really go into anything. So, for seeing this for the first time, I assumed you were going to expand the light rail, alignment, and then you came back to your findings to date, and it was actually land use around
Right.
the line.
Right. That's something that I haven't done the testing yet, but expanding the light rail itself is one of the things that I do plan to test. I just haven't done that yet. So yeah, the planned light rail expansions that Phoenix, both the approved ones and the, I don't know whether I'll just go with the ones that are already approved and funded, or the longer range ones that are planned but not approved yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's going to be
maybe a slide that shows what your options, expansion,
the difference
land use,
between.
or talk about them.
Okay, thanks.
So you have two light rail case studies, current and expansion. Why look at two? What do they tell you that are any different?
I think if I only did one, then I think it could be like a niche or a neat little demonstration, but it wouldn't actually show that you can test different variations of strategy. So I want to make sure that I would look at different variations on transition strategy, not just something that has already demonstrated that it already works. Here in Phoenix, we already know that the light rail system is pretty successful, and so just taking a look at that, it might kind of seem like those results are biased, or it's already working, so you didn't really tell me anything new.
So the current line won't tell you anything new?
I think projecting forward, the current line is already successful. It's exceeding its ridership projections, and so the benefits of it have already been demonstrated to the city of Phoenix. But so I don't know the utility of just looking at the current line is going to be useful for any of the policymakers or planners here in Phoenix.
So why are you looking at it then?
Why am I looking at it? Well, one of the main reasons is because it's not being used to its full capacity. We see this issue with vacant lots around the existing light rail. So it could be being used in a more efficient way. It's already working, but it could be working even better. That makes sense.
I think you've gotten yourself into trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. So,
Okay.
so I mean, I would say that the current line allows you to look back 5, 10, 20 years at the institutional or technical barriers that were overcome, right? Whereas the future line may have the same or different barriers, given that this current line is already in place, right? So it's sort of the marginal costs associated with overcoming some of these barriers or implementing these transitional strategies that you'd like to think about.
Right. Okay. And there is an interesting thing that's going on right now with the Mesa light rail expansion. Just last week, the city of Mesa got approval to take money out of their arterial life cycle program that they had planned back in 2002 to expand certain arterial roads because they expected growth in those regions. And now they're realizing that that growth hasn't to. The light rail is being used. Their park and ride system is working really well, so they would like to expand the light rail line, and they plan on funding it, this 1.9 miles of more light rail in Mesa. They're going to fund it by taking money out of the arterial life cycle program for certain roads, and instead use that money on the light rail. So these are ways, this has not been done before in Maricopa County. There has been money in the past taken from freeway projects, but never from arterial roadways. And so they're doing it, and they think it's going to be successful, and we'll see how that goes. But that is an example where they're looking at innovative ways of funding and knowing the benefits of the light rail. And the other cities that they were proposing this to within MAG, in the MAG meeting, the other cities were pretty excited about it because they started to realize that the people in Mesa, the residents of Mesa, are not going to the park and ride to go to downtown Mesa. They're going to the park and ride to get on the light rail to go to the other cities and spend their money in other cities. So it's advantageous to these other cities to be on board with this because it's going to benefit them. The jobs that are in Phoenix or in Tempe or the shopping that's, you know, in Phoenix they're gonna benefit from it.
So for the analysis that you did present, I assume the TOD and so on, I could see you had lots of different energy categories, right? Building energy, and I guess you had transportation energy as well in your analysis?
I do.
Okay. So I can kind of see how transportation energy impacts are maybe somewhat obvious because I guess in a TOD you have fewer people using automobile, maybe travel distances are shorter and so on. I was trying to, understand why would building energy use be less in the TOD? Are these smaller homes or?
That's a great question. It is there's a combination of effects that happen in higher density homes. There are generally less square footage per dwelling unit, so less space. And also there, in things like apartment buildings, you have this thing called a shared walls effect. So the overall energy consumption of that whole building is going to be less because you're sharing a wall with the apartment next door. They cool their apartment, I cool my apartment. We don't use as much electricity combined, things like that, and lighting, and the shared walls of just the construction materials as well. You have one roof instead of 1,000 individual single-family home roofs.
Did you have to make some assumptions about the transportation side of things, like what would trip distances look like or mode shares look like?
Definitely, yes.
And how did you come up with those assumptions?
So we used the National Household Travel Survey data to take a look at the behavioral characteristics, the typical commute. And then we had to make an assumption of how many people living in these TODs would actually be using the light rail. And we assumed that the number of workers in the house, we didn't assume that all of them would all of a sudden start using light rail because we don't know where their jobs are and that sort of thing. So we had to assume a fraction of the residents of these new TODs would use the light rail, and that still a proportion of people in these TODs would still be using their car to get to some other place. And then there were there's leisure travel in there as well, which we accounted for, that there was not as many leisure miles, but still some when you live in a TOD, because one of the concepts why TODs are great is because you're closer to sort of what's going on and recreational things as well, restaurants, shopping, that sort of thing. So theoretically, when you live in a TOD, you would have less leisure miles, but you still would have some. And then as you move outside the city, these single-family homes that are in the urban sprawl, they would have more leisure miles, the typical urban sprawl commute and the leisure mounds that they use. So yeah, we had to make some pretty generalized assumptions, but we tried as best we could to make them specific to the Southwest and to Phoenix from the travel survey data.
Any more questions? So thank you, Mindy, for presenting your proposal here today, and I would like to thank GPSC also for sponsoring this event.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.